Hello everybody, thanks for tuning in. This is the Eachine E010 and it has its obvious close listen relationship to something that we all know, the tiny hoop or the Blade Inductrix. This showed up last night and I've been flying it around a little bit, and here's some things that I think are of interest. It flies very similarly to the Blade Inductrix, and it has decent amount of punch for something with 6mm motors in this size. And I'll show you some footage here. I've filmed some things, but it's challenging to fly with this tiny little remote, and this feels like I'm flying with a peanut. So, and the springs are actually kind of stiff. It almost feels like, if you remember back in the days when they used to use magnets on cheap toy quads, where it was kind of, I think we called them bang bang, to where it wasn't proportional at all. It feels a lot like that. It's just you're either going or you're not. The throttle's not so bad. You can control that pretty well. But these are obviously your trim buttons here, and then this is for your changing of rates. It has 2 rates, and this is for your flips and rolls. Good news on this is that someone in RC Groups has already posted that this has a radio that might be compatible with other protocols available on the deviationtx, or if you're running a Devo 7E that's got the deviationtx on it, or a Devo 10, or the other Devos that are compatible. So we might be able to fly this with a hobby grade remote, and I think that would be a big improvement for one. The structure itself, it feels pretty solid. They actually did a nice job. Well, let's do this. Let's weigh it up first. Tear it out just for good measure. Oh. We'll just put the canopy on like that. So all in all, it's 16.7 grams without battery. Canopy itself, 0.9 grams. So I have a unhooped Blade Inductrix, 15.3 grams. If we pop the canopy off, these things weigh almost nothing. All their weight is actually in the quad itself. If I can get this off, 14.9. So this probably won't even register on here. 0.3. But it's very likely if you bought this, you're not interested in the canopy anyway. So taking canopy off will save you about 1 gram. Let's just do a visual inspection here, side by side. And the obvious similarities there. So we have 2 different kind of boards. We've got a square board and we've got a more elongated board, and we can see how it's mounted differently as well. The Eachine is just got some metal screws in it, whereas they used rubber grommets and screws on this one. And just having them in my hands like this and squeezing them a little bit, if there's a firmness difference in that direction, it's very, very slight and possibly in the favor of the Eachine. It's just very, very hard to tell without some sort of highly scientific gear. We can see the hoop sizes are either identical or really, really close. We can see this strut across the back here. Let me get a pointer out. This strut across the back. It's hard to get an exact comparison, but I'll get the calipers out here in a minute. But it drops down to mount the flight controller down lower. So the this might be a weaker point on the Blade Inductrix than it is with this one. And if we do a side comparison, I would say the same. There's just more substantial meat between the inductors. The blades look identical to me, but if we look at these closely, let me rotate this correct way here. Make sure we got front and front, back to back. Notice anything? The blades on the Eachine rotate like a traditional quadcopter. They're rotating in towards the nose and in towards the tail. Not the case with the Blade Inductrix. It doesn't really matter, but it's something to note. You don't want to put your props on like you did on your Blade Inductrix. The Inductrix rotate towards the sides. Still works, but it just they rotate differently. And those struts inside the hoops, they also look more substantial. I'll get my calipers out here We'll see if we can tell a difference. Looking at the bottom, the motor mounts, they're pretty much constructed the same. Looks like they reinforced a little bit down here with the struts. They put these little bridges or angle pieces on where we don't have those on the Inductrix. They also did something kind of nice with the wiring. They actually route the wiring within one of the struts here. So that keeps our wires from looking like that. The battery that comes with it, this is the on my charger, and I'll post a picture of it up here. On my charger, it says MCPX, I believe, and I don't have any other batteries like this at all. So why they went with something that's a little bit off, I don't know. Maybe it's normal. Maybe a lot of other people have those batteries. I don't. I have this size of battery. I have a whole bunch of this size of battery, but they all come with LOSI connectors. And that's something else to note, is that this connector seems to be stuck down to the board pretty good. I actually tried to remove it with some needle nose, thinking I could pull it off and then just solder on my own battery lead, and that might open up some options for other batteries, which I think we can still do, but you're just going to bust this thing up, and I didn't want to do that just yet. I want to fly it more. As far as making it a hoop, this little metal piece here, I can't remember what these are called, that's going to be a problem, because if you can look there, it sticks up a fairly healthy amount above the board. And so when you try to put something like this or something someone else prints, I'm sure somebody will come up with a print that has a little cutout in this that'll make it work perfectly, but for right now, either you're going to have to print your own or you're going to have to just use foam tape. But these prints for the Blade Inductrix are not going to quite mount very cleanly, and it kind of teeters on there, if you can see that. So you're probably going to have to put foam tape on this side and foam tape on that side. It's nice that they did use something here to keep that, I think it's a diode, from shaking around, which can lead to bad things. The wires are obviously soldered directly on. Of course, it's nicer that we could just plug these in. I do have the Spintech motors right now. The 6mm Spintechs don't come with ends, so you have to put your own on to put them on here. But so those would go in here real nice. Let me get my calipers out. Okay, so the Blade Inductrix, this stuff is soft, so this is not made up precise. About 8.7, and this is 8.4, so possibly the same or very, very close to the same. These little pieces in here, measuring 5.22. I'd have to disassemble this, I think, to get an actual measurement. Maybe I can get a little bite in there. So at its weakest point on the Inductrix, it's 2.78 in a similar spot. The battery compartment, or the battery itself, let's measure the internal side of the battery. About 17.3. Let me go back to 0. Try it one more time. 17.3, 17.5, right in there, fairly close. I think 17.3 is closer. And then this one might be a stretch, I don't know. See if I can get this in there. No. About 7.7. I'm not in there flush. These ends just aren't quite long enough to overcome this piece here. Let's measure the struts. Let's go back, make sure we're at 0. The struts on this one are about 2.37. Let's measure the struts over here. These are angled though, so that might pose an issue. I don't have any broken ones laying around, and I could... Yeah, that's not going to be a true measurement because it's angled in there. And I can't get my... Maybe if I bend things a bit. This will give us an idea. 2.3. Pretty certain these are 6mm motors. Yeah. These are going to measure pretty close to the same. Yeah. the props here, I'll get out what else comes in the package. You do get a full set of props. I don't really know that. I guess if you're removing props or putting them back on, yeah, we can damage those. The props look... Boy, I can't... They're very, very similar. Let's just measure the outer hoop distance. Of course, these are squishy. So about 36 millimeters. Let's measure one of these. Yeah, so about 36 as well. Oops. If you're interested in swapping this out for some other board, we can do some other measurements here. Let's go from... Try to do the motor hole, or not the motor holes, these little posts that aren't used out here. Right around 35.5. And if we go, there are two other screw holes in here. Those are 27.9. Make sure my calipers are still at 0. Yeah, that's about all I can think of. The battery itself, going to be about 16.3. About 7 millimeters, 6.9, 7 millimeters. Did I measure this way? Yeah, I'm 16.3, and then the length going to be about 24. And I dug through my batteries and tried to come up with something that was close. Of course, I have other batteries that are essentially the same, but this battery does not have the foam wrap on it like the other batteries that are even Eachine branded with the same 150 mAh 30C rating on them. Same, all intents and purposes, the same sticker. They just didn't put the wrap on it to make it fit. So that's a little bit disappointing. Let's see if it will fit. Yeah, you can get it in there. But it really, you know, unless we can do something about that battery connector, it really doesn't matter. Geez, it's not coming out very well, though. This battery I thought was smaller than what it was. Obviously, it's a nanotech. It's just too big. It's not going to fit. This one, show you what it is. This one comes with a plastic case. I took the case off and just put some heat shrink. Put that B on there because it's bad. It doesn't hardly work, doesn't hardly take a charge. But if we had something like this, it fits in there pretty decent. You know, it's probably not going to slide out unless we have a crash or anything, but it doesn't matter. It's so long that we can't plug anything in, so we can't get a higher rated C battery that I'm aware of to plug in here. We'd have to have something shorter, or we've got to have a battery lead, which we, like I said, we can do. We can destroy this thing and pull this thing off and solder on our own battery leads. We might be able to use some soldering wick and desolder those pins, and then pull it off. That's an idea. So you just got those two pins. If you had some soldering wick like this, be very, very careful. I have no idea. Oh, that's an LED back there, so not terribly important, but desolder those and pull those pins out, and you could then put on the battery lead of choice if you know of batteries that fit on here, or you just want to be able to put any old battery on there. You could take a Dremel and you could take out this front side, so you could slide this battery in further and then plug it in. If you have some of these leads, this is the connector on it. So then you start to get into some major mods if you want to do a different battery, but I'm sure somebody will come up with a higher C rated battery that fits right in here and is going to be popular if this thing is popular. I don't think there's anything else to show here. I have that picture of the high-tech charger. It will charge these batteries, so if you have a high-tech 4 charger, so you can get extra batteries like this. I'm not a fan of charging by these things. I just don't trust them. You never know if they're charging at the right rate or if they're damaging your batteries while they're charging. So I don't tend to use those. but I am going to take this for a flight with this controller, and then we'll also do some FPVing with it. Well, that's that. I should show you the FPV setup. This is the FX798T. This is my go-to camera. I think it's about 36 bucks, but it has a circular polarized antenna up there, and not much of a PCB sticking out. So I think that the camera's fine. And this is a mount for the tiny hoop, and you can see under there I took some foam tape and I put it around the diode there on both sides, and then just stuck that mount right down to it. I'm sure somebody will be 3D printing and selling mounts for this pretty soon, but as you can tell there's a gap if you want to use those screw mounting holes, and it seems like they're there for a reason. So maybe the ones that they sell on Banggood are actually made for this. I looked at the picture and it didn't look like there was anything coming down to cover that gap between the board and the where the screw hole is available. But maybe they took a picture of this, but they're sending us something else. Who knows? But this works just fine, and you could use foam tape or whatever you want to use. The board's a little bit wobbly. I think in my case the screws aren't all the way down. If you look real closely right up here, there's a little gap. But I don't know that we want it really screwed down tight. I'd rather it wobble than snap. But we get about 3 minutes of flight, which on the stock motors, that's pretty good, really. We don't get that with the tiny hoop. But part of my time was spent under the couch. But generally speaking, my flights, not just the one that I showed you, do come in around 3 minutes. For me, the hardest thing is this controller. It may work fine for you, but I sure hope that we can fly this with a Devo or a hobby grade controller soon. I'm sure the guys over at deviationtx are working on it. Matter of fact, I saw a posting tonight where one of them was he was wiring something up. I don't know how they do that stuff, but he was getting ready to do it, but got tied up in something else. So maybe in the next few days or week we'll know more. But for 15 bucks, boy, that's hard to beat, isn't it? It's hard to pay 50 bucks for this guy. As sad as that might be, that price discrepancy is pretty dramatic. And we may even find that the new flight controller board that was made for the Inductrix fits right in here. I don't know. We'll see. That flight control board, I believe, it's like an Angry Bee or Busy Bee. The name escapes me. I think it was about 50 bucks though. But overall, I think this flies pretty well. I'm sure I'll fly it a lot more. I'm sure I'll leave it intact like this. I'll have to order another camera for... Actually, I've got another Inductrix that just came in the other day that was showing earlier in the video that I need to put a camera on for a friend. Get him involved in FPV. We'll see what that develops on the batteries. Higher C-rated batterings would be nice. And I'm sure that some of you out there will be getting this and you'll be doing some mods so we can plug other batteries in and we don't get stuck with this. I know that they're selling replacement batteries on Banggood. I think there are 3 or 4 in a group, and they're not selling for very much. But overall, I think it flies pretty well. It's just the controller that I have a hard time with. It's a little bit twitchy in the video that you see, and it's still good fun. So if you're looking to get into FPV and maybe you just want to get started, or you'd like the tiny hoop but you just couldn't part with the amount of money that the Blade Inductrix costs, this is a perfectly good alternative at $15.99, free shipping. Pick up some extra batteries while you're there and have a good time. If you have any questions or comments, leave those in the section down below. If you like this little guy, give it a thumbs up. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you like green and black, give it a thumbs up. Whatever. Thanks for watching.